Eleanor Grayson's hands trembled slightly as she gripped the armrests of her wheelchair, the cold metal biting into her palms. The airport was a whirlwind of noise announcements crackling over the intercom, the shuffle of footsteps, and the hum of rolling suitcases. At 72, she'd seen her share of crowded places. But this was different. This was suffocating. The gate area buzzed with impatient travelers, their eyes darting to flight boards or phones, none sparing a glance for the old woman stranded in her chair. Her heart thudded unevenly, not from the bustle, but from the sting of betrayal that still burned in her chest. It had been her daughter, Claire, who'd wheeled her to gate 17, promising to return after grabbing a coffee. "Just stay here, Mom. I'll be right back," Claire had said. Her voice clipped, her eyes avoiding Eleanor's. That was an hour ago. Now, the gate was nearly empty, the last passengers boarding the flight to Chicago, and Claire was nowhere in sight. Eleanor's suitcase sat untouched beside her, a silent companion in her abandonment. She hadn't always needed the wheelchair. A year ago, a stroke had stolen the strength from her legs, leaving her dependent on others for mobility. Claire had insisted on this tripe of family reunion in Chicago, a chance to see her grandchildren, whom Eleanor hadn't seen in years. "It'll be good for you, Mom," Claire had said, though her tone carried more obligation than warmth. Eleanor had agreed, not because she believed it, but because she clung to the hope of mending the growing distance between them. Now, that hope felt like a cruel joke. She scanned the gate area again, her eyes catching on a young couple laughing as they hauled their carry-ons toward the jetway. No sign of Claire. No sign of anyone who cared. Her fingers brushed the worn leather of her purse, where her boarding pass was tucked away. She could still hear Claire's voice from earlier that morning, sharp and accusing. "You always make things harder than they need to be, Mom." The words had cut deeper than Eleanor let on. "Ma'am." A gate agent, a young man with a practiced smile, approached her. "Are you boarding the 3:45 to Chicago?" Eleanor's throat tightened. "My daughter. She was supposed to help me. She's not back yet." The agent's smile faltered. "I'm sorry, ma'am, but we're about to close the gate. Do you have your boarding pass?" She fumbled with her purse, her arthritic fingers clumsy as she pulled out the crumpled paper. The agent scanned it, then glanced at the empty seats around her. "I'll see what I can do," he said, but his tone was doubtful. He stepped away to speak into a walkie-talkie, leaving Eleanor alone again. Her mind spiraled back to the morning's argument. Claire had been frustrated, juggling her phone and a coffee cup while pushing Eleanor's wheelchair through the crowded terminal. "You didn't need to bring all this stuff, Mom," she'd snapped, gesturing at the small suitcase. "It's just a weekend." Eleanor had stayed silent, knowing her daughter's temper flared when challenged. But the truth was, that suitcase held more than clothes. It held photos of her late husband, George, and a knitted blanket her mother had made decades ago. They were pieces of a life she feared was slipping away. The agent returned, his expression apologetic. "I'm sorry, ma'am. The flight's full, and we've closed boarding. Your daughter, she didn't check in with you." Eleanor shook her head, the weight of the words sinking in. "She said she'd be back." He hesitated, then crouched to her level, his voice softening. "We can get you on the next flight, but it's not until tomorrow morning. Is there someone we can call?" The question hit like a punch. Who was there to call? Claire was her only child, and her grandchildren barely knew her. Friends had drifted away after George's death, and her neighbors, kind as they were, weren't family. "No," she whispered. "There's no one." The agent nodded, his eyes flickering with pity. Let's get you to a comfortable spot. Okay. We'll figure this out. As he wheeled her toward a quieter corner of the terminal, Eleanor's mind churned. Had Claire done this on purpose? The thought was a knife, twisting deeper with every second. She remembered Claire's words from weeks ago, when Eleanor had hesitated about the trip. You're always so difficult. Mom, if you don't want to go, just say it. Was this Claire's way of punishing her? Of proving a point? The terminal lights buzzed overhead, casting harsh shadows on the tiled floor. Eleanor's hands tightened on her purse, her knuckles white. She wasn't just stranded, she was discarded, left behind like forgotten luggage. But beneath the hurt, a spark of defiance flickered. She'd survived worse than this: George's death, the stroke, the slow erosion of her independence. She wasn't helpless. Not yet. Sir, she called out, her voice stronger than she felt. The agent turned, surprised. I need a phone. I'm going to figure this out myself. He nodded, a hint of respect in his eyes. All right, ma'am. Let's get you set up. As he wheeled her toward a service desk, Eleanor's resolve hardened. She didn't know where Claire was or why she'd left her here, but she wasn't going to sit quietly and wait for answers. She'd find a way forward, even if it meant doing it alone. The service desk was a small oasis of calm in the chaotic terminal, tucked behind a row of check-in counters. The agent, whose name tag read Mark, parked Eleanor's wheelchair beside a counter and handed her a corded phone. Take your time, ma'am, he said, his voice gentle but professional. I'll be nearby if you need me. Eleanor's fingers hovered over the keypad. She didn't know who to call first. Claire's number was the obvious choice, but the thought of hearing her daughter's voice, likely laced with irritation or excuses, made her stomach churn. Instead, she dialed her neighbor, Mrs. Delaney, a widow in her 60s who'd always been kind, if not close. The line rang twice before a familiar voice answered. Eleanor, is that you? Mrs. Delaney's tone was warm but tinged with concern. Aren't you supposed to be on a plane? Eleanor swallowed, her throat dry. I'm still at the airport. Claire, she left me at the gate. I missed the flight. There was a pause, then a sharp intake of breath. She what? Oh, honey, are you all right? The kindness in Mrs. Delaney's voice nearly broke her. Eleanor blinked back tears, forcing her voice to stay steady. I'm fine. Just stuck. I don't know where Claire is, and the next flight's not until tomorrow. That's unacceptable, Mrs. Delaney said, her voice firm. Do you need me to come get you? I can be there in an hour. Eleanor hesitated. The offer was tempting, but the thought of returning home, defeated, felt like giving up. No, thank you, Margaret. I'm going to stay. I need to figure out what happened. Mrs. Delaney sighed. All right, but you call me if you change your mind. And Eleanor, you don't deserve this. Not one bit. The words were a small comfort, but they didn't erase the ache in Eleanor's chest. After hanging up, she dialed Claire's number. It went straight to voicemail. Claire, it's Mom, she said, her voice trembling but resolute. I'm at the airport. You left me here, and I missed the flight. I need to know what's going on. Call me back. She left the service desk's number, then hung up, her hands shaking. Mark returned, holding a bottle of water and a granola bar. Thought you might need these, he said, setting them on the counter. We've got a spot for you at the airport hotel for tonight. No charge. I'll take you there when you're ready. Eleanor nodded, grateful but overwhelmed. Thank you, she whispered. She took a sip of the water, the cool liquid soothing her parched throat. As Mark stepped away to handle another passenger, she opened her purse and pulled out the small photo of George she always carried. His warm smile, frozen in time, steadied her. What would you do, George? She murmured. He'd always been the problem solver, the one who could charm his way out of any mess. But he was gone, and she was here, alone. Her thoughts drifted to the past, to the early days of her marriage when she and George had traveled together. They'd been fearless then, hopping on trains across Europe, laughing through missed connections and language barriers. She'd been strong, independent, a woman who could handle anything. The stroke had taken that from her, or so she'd thought. But sitting here, abandoned and forgotten, she felt a flicker of that old fire. She wasn't helpless. She wasn't invisible. She glanced at the clock above the desk. It was nearly 5 p.m. The terminal was quieter now, the rush of afternoon flights giving way to an eerie calm. She dialed Claire again. Voicemail. This time, she didn't leave a message. Instead, she opened her suitcase and pulled out the knitted blanket, draping it over her lap. It smelled faintly of lavender, a reminder of her mother's hands, her mother's strength. She wouldn't let Claire's actions define her. Mark, she called, her voice firmer now. He turned, his eyebrows raised. Can you help me get to the hotel? And is there a way to check if my daughter boarded that flight? He nodded, jotting down a note. I'll look into it. Let's get you settled first. The airport hotel was a short ride away, accessible via a shuttle that Mark arranged. The room was small but clean, with a wide window overlooking the tarmac. Eleanor watched planes take off and land, their lights blinking against the darkening sky. She felt a strange mix of exhaustion and determination. Claire might have left her, but she wouldn't let this break her. That night, as she lay in the stiff hotel bed, she thought about the reunion she was supposed to attend. Her grandchildren, Lily and Max, were 8 and 10 now. She'd only seen them a handful of times since George's death, their visits growing shorter and less frequent as Claire's life grew busier. Eleanor had hoped this trip would change that, would bridge the gap that had widened over the years. Instead, it had exposed a truth she hadn't wanted to face. Claire didn't want her there. The phone rang, startling her. She reached for it, her heart leaping with hope. Hello? Mom. Claire's voice was sharp, almost accusing. Why are you still at the airport? They said you refused to board. Eleanor's breath caught. Refused. Claire, you left me at the gate. I waited for you. There was a pause, then a huff. I got caught up with work calls. I thought you'd manage. You always make everything so dramatic. The words were a slap, but Eleanor refused to flinch. I'm in a wheelchair. Claire, I needed you. And you weren't there. Claire sighed, her tone softening but not apologetic. Look, I'll sort it out. Just stay put. I'll call you tomorrow. The line went dead. Eleanor stared at the receiver, her chest tight. She didn't know if Claire was lying or simply careless, but it didn't matter. The truth was clear. Her daughter had chosen to leave her behind. Morning light filtered through the hotel window, casting long shadows across the room. Eleanor hadn't slept much, her mind replaying Claire's words. You always make everything so dramatic. The accusation stung, not because it was true, but because it revealed how little Claire understood her. Eleanor had spent years swallowing her pain, hiding her struggles to avoid burdening her daughter. And yet, here she was, blamed for her own abandonment. She dressed slowly, her movements deliberate despite the ache in her joints. The hotel staff had been kind, bringing her breakfast and ensuring her wheelchair was accessible. Mark had called earlier to confirm her new flight for 10 a.m., and he'd promised to check on Claire's status. As Eleanor packed her small suitcase, she felt a quiet resolve settle over her. She wasn't going to Chicago to beg for Claire's approval. She was going for herself, for the chance to see her grandchildren, to reclaim a piece of her family. At the airport, Mark met her at the hotel shuttle stop. His face was grim. "Mrs. Grayson, I checked the passenger manifest. Your daughter boarded the flight yesterday." Eleanor's heart sank, though she wasn't surprised. "Thank you, Mark," she said, her voice steady. "Can you get me on that 10 a.m. flight?" "Already done," he said, handing her a new boarding pass. "And I've arranged for an assistant to help you board. You won't be alone this time." His kindness brought a lump to her throat. "You've been very good to me," she said. "I won't forget it." Mark smiled, a genuine warmth in his eyes. "Just doing my job, ma'am. Safe travels." The flight to Chicago was smooth, but Eleanor's mind was anything but calm. She stared out the window, the clouds below a swirling reminder of her uncertainty. What would she find when she landed? Would Claire be there, full of excuses? Or would she face another empty gate? The thought of seeing Lily and Max kept her grounded. She imagined their faces, their laughter, the way they'd clung to her during their last visit years ago. She wouldn't let Claire take that from her. When the plane touched down, an assistant named Sarah helped her disembark, wheeling her through the crowded Chicago terminal. Eleanor scanned the arrivals area, her heart pounding. No sign of Claire. Instead, a man in his 30s approached, his face familiar but older than she remembered. It was Tom, Claire's husband. "Eleanor," he said, his voice hesitant. "I'm so sorry about yesterday. Claire told me you chose not to board." Eleanor's jaw tightened. "Chose? Tom. She left me at the gate. I waited for her, and she didn't come back." Tom's face fell, his eyes flickering with guilt. I didn't know. She said you were being stubborn, that you missed the flight on purpose." The words were a fresh wound, but Eleanor refused to let them break her. "I'm here now," she said. "I want to see Lily and Max." Tom nodded, his expression softening. "They're at the house. They've been asking about you. Let's get you there." The drive to Claire's suburban home was quiet, the tension thick between them. Tom tried to make small talk, but Eleanor's thoughts were elsewhere. She clutched her purse, the photo of George inside a reminder of her strength. When they arrived, Lily and Max ran out to greet her, their faces bright with excitement. "Grandma," Lily squealed, throwing her arms around Eleanor's neck. Max hung back, shy but smiling, his eyes wide as he took in her wheelchair. Eleanor's heart swelled. "Oh, my darlings," she said, pulling them close. For a moment, the pain of Claire's betrayal faded. These were her grandchildren, her reason for being here. Claire appeared at the door, her arms crossed, her face a mask of indifference. "You made it," she said, her tone flat. "I thought you'd just go home." Eleanor met her daughter's gaze, her voice calm but firm. "I came for them," she said, nodding toward Lily and Max. "Not for you." Claire flinched, but said nothing. Tom ushered everyone inside, and Eleanor spent the afternoon with her grandchildren, listening to their stories, laughing at their antics. Lily showed her a drawing she'd made, a colorful scribble of a family holding hands. "That's you, Grandma," she said, pointing to a figure with gray hair. Eleanor's eyes misted. "It's beautiful, sweetheart." As the day wore on, Claire kept her distance, busying herself in the kitchen or on her phone. Eleanor noticed the tension in her daughter's shoulders, the way she avoided eye contact. Something was wrong, deeper than the airport incident. But Eleanor wasn't ready to confront it. Not yet. That night, after the children were in bed, Tom sat with Eleanor in the living room. "She's been under a lot of pressure," he said quietly. "Work, the kids. It's not an excuse. But she's not herself." Eleanor nodded, but her heart was heavy. "I've lost her, Tom," she said. "I don't know when it happened, but I've lost her." Tom reached for her hand, his grip warm and steady. "You haven't lost the kids. And you haven't lost me." His words were a lifeline, but they couldn't erase the truth. Claire had abandoned her, not just at the airport, but in a deeper, more painful way. As Eleanor lay in the guest room that night, she made a decision. She wouldn't let Claire's rejection define her. She would fight for her place in this family, for her grandchildren, for herself. The next morning, Eleanor woke to the sound of laughter drifting from the kitchen. Lily and Max were up, their voices bright as they argued over who got the last pancake. She smiled, the sound a balm to her bruised heart. Moving slowly, she maneuvered herself into her wheelchair and made her way to the kitchen, where Tom was flipping pancakes while the kids chattered. "Grandma," Max called, waving a syrup-sticky hand. "Dad's making smiley face pancakes." Eleanor laughed, the warmth of the moment easing the tension from the previous day. "They look delicious," she said, ruffling Max's hair as he scooted closer. Claire was there too, sitting at the counter with a coffee mug, her eyes fixed on her phone. She glanced up as Eleanor entered, her expression unreadable. "Morning," she said, her voice clipped. "Morning," Eleanor replied, keeping her tone neutral. She wouldn't let Claire's coldness ruin this moment with her grandchildren. The day passed in a blur of small joys. Lily insisted on painting Eleanor's nails, her tongue poking out in concentration as she applied bright pink polish. Max read her a chapter from his favorite book, stumbling over the big words but beaming with pride. Eleanor soaked it all in, memorizing their faces, their voices, their love. It was a reminder of why she'd fought to get here, despite everything. But the tension with Claire lingered, a shadow over the weekend. Eleanor caught glimpses of her daughter's stress-snapped replies to Tom, hurried phone calls, a tightness around her eyes that hadn't been there years ago. She wanted to reach out, to ask what was wrong, but Claire's walls were impenetrable. On the second evening, after the kids were asleep, Eleanor found Claire alone on the back porch, staring at the darkening sky. She wheeled herself outside, the cool air sharp against her skin. "Claire," she said softly, "we need to talk." Claire's shoulders stiffened, but she didn't turn. "About what?" "The airport. I told you. I got caught up." "It's not just the airport," Eleanor said, her voice steady. "It's us. You and me. What happened to us?" Claire finally turned, her face a mix of anger and exhaustion. "What happened? You're the one who changed, Mom. After Dad died, you shut down. You stopped trying. And now you expect me to drop everything to take care of you." The words cut deep, but Eleanor held her gaze. "I lost your father, Claire. I lost my health. But I never stopped loving you. I came here for you, for the kids. And you left me." Claire's eyes glistened, but she blinked the tears away. I didn't mean to. I can't handle everything. Work's a mess. The kids are a handful. And you need so much. Eleanor's heart ached. But she refused to back down. I need my daughter. Claire. Not a caretaker. Just my daughter. Claire looked away. Her jaw tight. I don't know how to do that anymore. She whispered. The admission hung between them. Raw and painful. Eleanor wanted to reach out. To pull her daughter into her arms. But the distance felt too vast. Instead, she said, I'm not giving up on you. But I need you to meet me halfway. Claire didn't respond. But she didn't leave either. They sat in silence. The night wrapping around them. Heavy with unspoken words. The next day, Eleanor focused on the children. Determined to make the most of her time. She taught Lily how to braid. Her fingers guiding the little girl's hands through the motions. She listened to Max's stories about school. His eyes lighting up as he described his science project. These moments were her anchor. Her reason to keep going. But Claire's words from the porch lingered. A reminder of the fracture in their relationship. Eleanor knew she couldn't fix it alone. But she also knew she couldn't walk away. Not from her daughter. Not from her family. On the final morning of the reunion, Tom drove her to the airport. The kids in the back seat singing a silly song. Claire had stayed behind, claiming a work call. Eleanor hugged Lily and Max tightly, promising to call soon. As Tom wheeled her to the gate, he leaned down and said, She's trying. Eleanor. She just doesn't know how to show it. Eleanor nodded, her throat tight. I know. But I'm not done trying either. The flight home was quiet. The hum of the plane a steady backdrop to her thoughts. She thought of George, of the life they'd built together, of the daughter they'd raised. Claire was hurting, just as Eleanor was. But love wasn't a finite thing. It could bend, stretch, endure. She'd find a way to reach her daughter, even if it took time. When she landed, Mrs. Delaney was waiting at the gate, her face lighting up as she saw Eleanor. You made it, she said, pulling her into a hug. I did, Eleanor said, smiling through her fatigue. And I'm not done yet. As Mrs. Delaney drove her home, Eleanor looked out at the familiar streets, her heart heavy but hopeful. She'd been abandoned. Yes, but she'd also found something in Chicago, her strength, her purpose, her family. She wasn't invisible, and she wasn't alone. Not anymore. Back in her small apartment, Eleanor felt the weight of routine settle over her. The familiar creak of the floorboards, the faint scent of lavender from her mother's blanket. The photo of George on the nightstand, it was all comforting, but also a reminder of how much had changed. She'd returned from Chicago with more than just memories of her grandchildren. She'd brought back a renewed sense of purpose, a determination to rebuild what had been broken with Claire. The first few days were quiet. She didn't hear from Claire, and she resisted the urge to call, giving her daughter space. Instead, she focused on small acts of independence. She arranged for a physical therapist to visit twice a week, hoping to regain some mobility. She called Mrs. Delaney, inviting her over for tea, and found comfort in their shared stories of loss and resilience. She even started writing letters to Lily and Max, filling them with stories about their grandfather and the adventures she'd had as a young woman. But Claire's silence gnawed at her. A week after her return, Eleanor finally picked up the phone and dialed her daughter's number. This time, Claire answered on the second ring. Mom, she said, her voice softer than before. I was going to call you. Eleanor's heart lifted, but she kept her tone steady. I'm glad you picked up. I've been thinking about you. There was a pause, then a sigh. I'm sorry, Mom. For the airport. For everything. I didn't mean to hurt you. The apology was tentative, but it was a start. Eleanor closed her eyes, picturing Claire's face on the porch, the exhaustion in her eyes. I know you're struggling, Claire, but we can't keep hurting each other. I want us to be a family again. I want that too, Claire said, her voice breaking. I don't know how to fix it. One step at a time, Eleanor said, echoing words George used to say. Let's start with talking. Really talking. They spoke for nearly an hour, the conversation halting but honest. Claire admitted to the pressures of her job, the strain of parenting, the guilt she felt for pulling away after George's death. Eleanor listened, her heart aching for her daughter's pain, but also hopeful. It wasn't a full reconciliation, but it was a crack in the wall between them. Over the next few weeks, Eleanor and Claire began to rebuild. Claire called more often, sharing small updates about the kids or her day. Eleanor sent the letters to Lily and Max, and soon, they started calling her, their voices bubbling with excitement over the phone. One afternoon, Claire sent a photo of Lily holding one of Eleanor's letters. Her face lit up with a smile. It was a small gesture, but it felt like a bridge. Eleanor also found herself changing. The physical therapy was grueling, but she pushed through, determined to regain some strength. She started volunteering at a local community center, reading to children and sharing stories of her travels with George. It wasn't much, but it gave her purpose, a way to feel useful again. One evening, as she sat with Mrs. Delaney over tea, Eleanor shared her hopes for the future. I want to see the kids again, she said. Maybe have them visit here. And Claire, I think we're finding our way back. Mrs. Delaney smiled, her eyes crinkling. You're a fighter, Eleanor. Always have been. The word stayed with her, a reminder of the woman she'd been before the stroke, before George's death, before Claire's distance. She wasn't that woman anymore, but she was someone who could face abandonment and still choose to love, to fight, to hope. A month later, Claire called with a surprise. Mom, we're coming to visit. All of us. The kids are so excited. Eleanor's heart soared. When? Next weekend. And I want to stay a few days. Just us. If that's okay. It was more than okay. It was a chance to heal, to rebuild, to be a family again. When the day arrived, Eleanor waited at her apartment door, her wheelchair positioned just so. Lily and Max burst in first, their hugs fierce and warm. Claire followed, her eyes softer than Eleanor had seen in years. Hi, Mom, she said, leaning down to hug her. It was a real hug, not the perfunctory kind Eleanor had grown used to. Hi, sweetheart, Eleanor replied, her voice thick with emotion. They spent the weekend together, laughing, talking, remembering. Claire opened up about her fears, her regrets, and Eleanor listened, offering the love she'd always carried, even when it wasn't returned. It wasn't perfect, but it was a start. As they sat together one evening, watching Lily and Max play in the small living room, Claire reached for Eleanor's hand. I'm sorry I left you, she said quietly. I won't do it again. Eleanor squeezed her daughter's hand, her heart full. I know, she said, and I'm not going anywhere. The visit from Claire and the children marked a turning point. It wasn't a fairy tale ending those didn't exist in real life, but it was a beginning. Eleanor felt the shift in her relationship with Claire, a slow thawing of the distance that had grown between them. The pain of the airport abandonment lingered, but it no longer defined her. Instead, it had become a catalyst, a moment that forced her to reclaim her strength and her place in her family. Over the months that followed, Eleanor and Claire worked to rebuild their bond. They talked weekly, sometimes about nothing more than the weather or the kids' school projects. But those small conversations were a lifeline. Claire started sharing more about her life, her fears, her hopes, and Eleanor listened without judgment, offering the wisdom she'd gained through years of love and loss. Lily and Max became a constant presence in her life, even from a distance. They sent drawings and letters, and Eleanor kept them pinned to a bulletin board in her living room, a colorful reminder of their love. She began planning a trip to visit them again, this time with no expectations of Claire's help. She'd learned to rely on herself, to ask for help when needed, but never to depend on it. Her physical therapy progressed, and though she'd never walk unaided again, she gained enough strength to move more easily, to feel less like a prisoner in her own body. The community center became her second home, where she found joy in reading to children and sharing stories of her past. She told them about George, about the trains they'd taken across Europe, about the time they'd gotten lost in Paris and laughed until they cried. The children listened, wide-eyed, and Eleanor felt her old spark reignite. One afternoon, as she sat at the community center, a young volunteer named Mia approached her. "Mrs. Grayson, you should write your stories down," she said. "They're amazing. People would love to read them." The idea took root. Eleanor had always loved writing, though she'd set it aside after George's death. Now, she began to write again, starting with small vignettes about her travels, her family, her life. She wrote about the airport, about the pain of being left behind, but also about the strength she'd found in herself. The words flowed, raw and honest, and she found catharsis in putting them on paper. Claire visited again a few months later, this time alone. They spent a quiet weekend together, cooking, talking, and sorting through old photos. When Claire found a picture of herself as a child, sitting on George's shoulders, she smiled, her eyes misty. "I miss him," she said. "So do I," Eleanor replied, her hand resting on Claire's. "But he's still here. In us. In the kids." Claire nodded, her voice soft. "I'm trying, Mom. I want to be better for you. For them." "You already are," Eleanor said, and she meant it. The road to healing was long, but they were walking it together. As Claire prepared to leave, she hugged Eleanor tightly, lingering longer than usual. "I love you, Mom," she said, her voice steady. "I love you too," Eleanor replied, her heart full. After Claire left, Eleanor sat at her desk, her notebook open to a blank page. She began to write, the words pouring out like a river. She wrote about the airport, about the wheelchair, about the moment she'd decided to fight for herself. She wrote about Claire, about the pain of their distance and the hope of their reconciliation. She wrote about Lily and Max, about the love that had carried her through. When she finished, she titled the piece, "They Abandoned Me, But I Found Myself." It wasn't just a story, it was her truth, her triumph, her legacy. Months later, Mia helped her publish the story in a local magazine. The response was overwhelming letters from strangers, many elderly, who'd felt invisible, forgotten, but inspired by Eleanor's resilience. She read each one, her heart swelling with gratitude. She wasn't alone, and neither were they. On a crisp spring morning, Eleanor sat in her apartment, the bulletin board covered with new drawings from Lily and Max. The phone rang, and Claire's voice came through, bright and warm. "Mom, the kids want to come for the summer. Can we make it work?" Eleanor smiled, her eyes tracing the photos on her nightstand. George, Claire, the kids, her family. We'll make it work, she said. We always do. As she hung up, she looked out the window at the world beyond, vibrant and alive. She'd been abandoned. Yes, but she'd found something greater, herself, her strength, her love. And that was enough.